we don't even do budgets, right? So it is not working here. It's just not working. And I don't think the American people would give us much talk back about that. So yes, we have the power to do it, but we don't seem to have the will to do it. And I'm worried we don't have the capacity to do it. I think we've gotten out of the mechanics of doing deals here that seem natural to me, even as a trial lawyer, is to settle cases. That was part of what we did. That doesn't happen here. It just doesn't happen here. Then we'll make speeches about what the best answer is, and then we'll go walk our own way. We've made our record. We haven't made progress. It is a different situation here. Now we're borrowing almost $2 trillion a year just to pay our expenses. We're putting groceries on the credit card. And as a result of that, this year we're spending $663 billion in interest. That's not investment. That's not money that's going into any good use. That's paying for what we already did in the past. By 2027, we'll be spending more on interest than we are in defense. As a Democrat, I really want to do the child tax credit. I can tell you, I think that's one of the most important anti-poverty, pro-children investments we can do. It's expensive. I can't afford it if we spend all the money on interest. I can't make that argument. I also say, finally, that the answer has got to be bipartisan. It just is obvious to me that politics is as much of a fact here as science or numbers or arithmetic or anything else. You need 218, you need 60. And here's why I think Democrats should be interested in a commission like the one I proposed, but there are other variations. One is on Medicare and Social Security. I think that there are people who want to cut Medicare and Social Security. I'm on Jan's side. On Jan Schakowsky's side. I want to preserve that program. But current law doesn't provide for general fund funding. Current law doesn't provide for the good integrity proposal that Mr. Boyle proposed or that Mr. Larson's proposed. Current law is going to cut benefits by 25% when the lines cross. And if you want to cut Medicare and Social Security, what you do is nothing, because you're already on track to win that battle, if that's what your real goal is. If you want to save it, the sooner you do it, the better off we are. I don't see that happening without a commission. That's why we have to have it. The other thing is, finally, on tax cuts. I railed against the Republican tax cuts in 2017, which were projected and have proven out to cost $1.9 trillion, right? Which, by the way, every year we're borrowing that amount. So that wasn't all that much of an unusual event. And we're going to see the same pressure from Republicans to extend those in 2025. And if we don't have a cop on the beat, this commission, we're going to have the same conversation where I'm told that these things pay for themselves. I'm tired of that. Democrats need to push back on that. To do that, we need people in the room dealing with facts. I don't see a way to do it other than a commission. I hope we'll get around to that. I really think it's the only practical way to deal with this problem, because I think we've proven over 20 years that this doesn't work. And people come to me now and they say, back in 1993, we did it this way. Back in 1983, we did it this way. Are you kidding me? This is not that place. And I've been here long enough to see we're not making deals. We're not talking facts. We're really this. I'm going to say, finally, this chairman and this ranking member have been really good. Set a good example for how to not be performative. But we're still not getting the job done here. And I think we need a kick in the pants. We need the support of people in the room dealing with facts, outside experts and members working together. I think we should give it a shot, and I yield.
If it's okay, I know Mr. Doug is being recognized, but can I just yield 30 seconds? I just want to point something out. I apologize, Lloyd, but just to make ourselves feel a little bit better about ourselves, everyone cites kind of Reagan, Tip O'Neill, shaking hands, saving Social Security back in 1983. The part of the story, which is a wonderfully inspiring story, and I appreciate it, the part of the story that's sometimes left out, they were weeks away from missing Social Security checks. That's how dire it was. So to a point you made maybe an hour and a half ago, the fact that we do have about a decade until 2033, it helps us in terms of the numbers right now, but given human nature, it actually hurts us. So let's as we remember fondly the past, let's not forget that actually they did wait until pretty much the last minute before they finally acted. And with that, I yield back.
Representative Gentleman from Texas, Mr. Doggett.
Thank you very much. Well, I share the chairman's concern and that of most of the witnesses about our soaring national debt and the need for this Congress to do more to put us on a sound financial footing. I am a progressive Democrat. I believe we're not doing enough on child care, on educational opportunity from pre-K to post-grad, to combating the climate crisis, to ensuring retirement security, and a number of health care, of course. But all of those things cost money. And I believe in paying as you go, and that we cannot shift the cost of doing all those things onto future generations. I understand the skepticism that Chairman Yarmouth voices, and I share it based on the prior experience with these commissions. I think they primarily, as Senator Portman said, have elevated the discussion and kept the issue out there. But I don't see all that much accomplished from them. And I'm certainly strongly against any commission that has as its primary objective to remove accountability or minimize accountability for Congress for cutting Medicare and Social Security. And that, of course, is against a background where the one time we did achieve a balanced budget and we're on a path to significantly reduce the federal debt in the Clinton administration, that didn't take a commission. It took some political courage, and it was fairly costly to some of the people who had the courage to vote to help us get on a balanced budget path. I think that there are a number of proposals. Representative Peters just referenced Congressman Larson's idea on Social Security. I think it has some good points and some flaws. I have one. The president has a proposal out about the future of Medicare and how to finance it, but I'm not sure there's the will in Congress to get this job done, and that's why I'm open at least to the idea of a fiscal commission. I think it has to be a commission that quite clearly puts revenue on the table, because if revenues are not on the table, it is a commission to cut Social Security and Medicare, as the ranking member pointed out with some of the statements that he's filed, and something I care about deeply. And I guess my question to the senators is a commission, based on your experience there with Bowles-Simpson, is it a mechanism? It's impossible for our Republican colleagues to countenance any kind of revenue increase for any purpose, it seems. Is such a commission a place where we might find common ground, not only at looking at areas of excessive government spending growth, but looking at the revenues to help us get true balance?
Can I just respond quickly, Mr. Chairman, and say, when Bowles-Simpson went down, a group of 6 of us in the Senate, 3 Democrats, 3 Republicans, were asked by leadership to see if we couldn't come up with a way forward to adopt the principles of Bowles-Simpson and make whatever changes are necessary to actually be in a position to pass something. We worked for 2 years, 3 Democrats, 3 Republicans. At the end of that time, we put out a proposal that had significant revenue. It also had savings on the spending side. I was asked by President Obama and Vice President Biden to come up and explain to them, how did you get this kind of result? How did you get Republicans to agree to revenue? I said, we spent 2 years going over all of the options and the effects on the people that we represent. And at the end of the day, we had some of the most conservative Republicans in the United States Senate agreeing to substantial increases in revenue. You had Democrats, some of the most progressive Democrats in the United States Senate, agreeing to savings on the spending side. So to me, the need for, I completely agree with Mr. McClintock. This is a responsibility of Congress. They're not doing it. Let's deal with reality. They're not doing it. I agreed entirely with Mr. Higgins' statement about the greatness of America, the strengths of America. I agreed with every word he said. But at the end of the day, we are headed for a 24% cut to every Social Security beneficiary. That's what's going to happen. Now, we could avoid that. We could adopt what Chairman Yarmouth has suggested. That's a serious alternative. But that isn't the law. The law is everybody is going to get cut 24%. Now, when are we going to do something about it?
Thank you, Mr. Doggett. I'll briefly recognize myself again to ask a dear friend, de facto mentor, and former chairman, Mr. Womack, a quick question. But I wanted to just highlight one thing. Folks, we have something good going on here right now. We've got one of the senior members of our side on the Republican side saying we don't need this. We have members from the Democrat side saying we do need this. This is good. This is healthy. And I think the point of a catalyst, because we've watched it play out, we are in a different situation than we were in '83. We are in a different situation. And the question, Mr. Womack, two questions. Mandatory spending now is representing over 70% of our budget. That wasn't the case 20, 30, 40 years ago. It's a fundamentally different scenario that we're in now. This is not post-World War II when we could just reduce defense spending and all of a sudden get our debt to GDP back on track. So just share some context with the change in where we are now. And then a question that I did not have prepared for you. I was going to talk about interest rates and stuff, but we've kind of covered that. Give me your sense for where the Republican conference is on this right now. I've seen a lot of discussions on a potential of a debt commission, knowing it's not going to be, a perfect, pristine bill that's going to be tough for everybody. Like, give me your sense. Do you feel something similar? Do you think that there's an urgency and a willingness to engage in this? And I'll defer to you.
Thanks for the question. Willie Sutton, the famous bank robber, when asked why he robbed banks, said, because that's where the money is. And we, as I said in my opening, we spend an enormous amount of time and spend a lot of political capital talking about the discretionary budget. Chairman presiding, Mr. Moore, you are correct. If you go back to 1965, discretionary spending was clearly the largest piece of the federal budget. 65-ish%, give or take. And then now here in 2023, it's completely flipped. It's 70+% on mandatory. So that should illustrate to everyone that has just basic fifth grade arithmetic that if you're going to fix a $2 trillion deficit, and indeed quit digging this hole deeper, you can't do it on discretionary spending. You can barely scratch the surface. The discretionary budget that we are debating right now is in that $1.5 trillion range, and we know that the deficit this year is going to be upwards of $2 trillion. We know that net interest on the debt is going to be north of $650 billion. So we are going to have to muster the courage to be able to deal with it. Now, your question about where Republicans stand on it, let me just cover both sides of the aisle. One side of the aisle would like to take the option off the table of any cuts or any reforms. Let me push back against that. Not necessarily any reforms, but they don't any reform that is proposed. And when I did my FY19 budget, not in this room, but in this committee, that balanced in a 9-year window, remember the one thing that we did that never made it to the floor, but made it into our budget. We just tried to do something really simple, and that is equalize the age of Medicare eligibility with Social Security. Move the retirement age from 65, the qualification age, 65 to 67. You would have thought I canceled a day of the week. So my argument is, if you can't do something like that, then what, pray tell, can you do to fix the bigger problem? And then when you look to my friends in my caucus, when you start talking about any additional revenues, well, that's hands off. That's why when Senator Conrad said, and I totally agree. And look, I know when this is over and it's published, that the next ad against me is going to be, yeah, this guy wants to raise your taxes. No, what I'm simply saying is, when you're this deep in the hole, you better consider every available option on the table.
or else you're never going to fix the problem. And that's why it's going to require the courage of the American people. It's why I said that we have to make our constituents subject matter experts, because I believe in my heart this, that if our constituents knew across the spectrum of this great country that this was the near-term biggest national security and economic challenge facing our country, they would step up to the plate and say, I will do my part. That's what Americans do. I will do my part. But they don't trust this Congress because we always have some way around it. We always have an exit ramp. We always have some other way of deferring the challenge. So again, Chairman Moore, I would tell you that if we can educate our constituents and make them subject matter experts, whether it's a commission or a fiscal State of the Union or any other mechanism, then I think we would be on the road to solving the problem and being able to take the heat that the members will fade away, whether it's restructuring or whether it's revenues or any other available option. Sorry to belabor the point.
Thank you, Chairman. I would like to add that every town hall you come to for me in my district, there's a 5 or 6 slide presentation that we do. It's my former consultant coming out, where I really do try to educate and make people understand why we're in the situation that we are. And I just avoid rhetoric and just tell people the facts. And when I do, they actually appreciate it. So I'm trying to do my part, 30 to 40 person town halls at a time. Flora recognizes my good friend from California and son of the leader who last balanced our budget, part of that group that last balanced our budget, Mr. Jimmy Panetta.
Thanks, Blake. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, thank you very much for being here. Chair Womack, I completely agree with you, and that's something that obviously that I heard plenty of times from that swarthy Italian that's depicted in that portrait over there, is that everything needs to be on the table. I completely agree with you. The problem is, and what I've seen in my limited time here, and what I try to convince my father, is that I do believe it, despite some brains that are in this room, we have lost the art of legislating. We have not got to the point where we've really given that time needed to develop the policy upon which then we can educate the people. And that has a lot to do with leadership and so many other things that we can go on and on about. But I think that really is to our detriment, because when we don't have policy to rely on, then we're left with politics. And we don't have that will to lean in to the policy. And politics sort of dictates what we do. So that is why I'm a firm believer in the Fiscal Commission. It is why I am concerned about our increasing debt and deficits, and I'm committed to working across the aisle to put our country on the path to fiscal responsibility. And like Chairman Yarmouth said, and like many of you are stating, there just isn't the political will to get our fiscal house in order when we use regular order, unfortunately. You got Democrats who are opposing spending cuts, you got Republicans who are opposing tax increases, and we end up increasing our spending and passing tax cuts and ballooning our deficits. Meanwhile, we have a lack of action to shore up our trust funds. It means that we're facing steep cuts to Social Security and Medicaid in a decade. That's why I'm a strong supporter of the commission. That's why I'm proud to introduce the legislation that Scott and Bill put together in regards to this commission and as members of the Bipartisan Fiscal Forum. And I do want to make something clear. As we heard, I do think everything should be on the table, and that includes revenue. The United States is a low-tax country, ranking 32nd out of 38th in OECD countries in terms of tax to GDP ratio. I just think we'll never come to an agreement if we take one half of that equation, revenue, off the table. Now, Brian Riddell, Manhattan Institute, said something that I believe in, that commissions can be useful if both parties are truly committed to achieving an outcome rather than just checking the box. And I think, unfortunately, the way we legislate or don't legislate these days is we just check the box. And that's why I think we need to have this commission to help us get past the politics and help us actually focus on policies that will affect the future. I'm out of time. I do have questions, but I will yield back. Thank you.
Thank you. The chair now recognizes a gentleman from Maryland, Mr. Trone.
Thanks very much for this time and your efforts here together, and this really distinguished panel. I'm probably the only business guy in the room that has 12,000 employees and owns a $6 billion business, and I couldn't agree more with what Mr. Womack had to say. Everything he said, I agree with 100%. And Mr. Panetta, time to develop policy and not just keep developing politics. I mean, totally on board. We've got to look at the whole piece. I mean, the revenue side, I mean, we've got to have that on the table. The C Corp rate, 32.38. I hadn't heard that stat, but we were at 35% on C Corps. Now we're 21. Effective rate's roughly 12%. The G7's effective rate is 23, yet we're only taxing at 12. We've given C Corps just a complete free ride. It's $2 trillion in 10 years, $200 billion a year that we should have for that child tax credit. That's the kind of folks think we should be doing, is helping folks that are really struggling, children in poverty. That's where we need to get money to drive, but we've got to drive the revenue side. And I'm going to tell you, as a business person, I don't make a decision on opening a new business, and I opened up, my company did probably 20 new businesses this year, and we'll do 25 next year based on the tax rate. No one's ever asked that question. Never. We base it on our competition. Can we beat them? And can we then create a P&L that pencils out? And that's how we look at it. We don't say 35 or 21. That was Donald Trump. He's a pathetic businessman. He's a fraud. He's a failure. Everybody in the business world has always known that he's a fraud and a failure. And why every developer I've ever met said, never do business with him. He's crazy. He's untrustworthy. Why would we touch him? Obviously, he doesn't even use American banks, because no American bank who have plenty of lending capacity would lend to him. That's how he ended up at Deutsche Bank. So bottom line is we got to look at those things, drive the revenue side. But John Larson's proposal, Social Security, I love that proposal. Good step. But we got to look at everything. It can't just be, one side or the other side. So, but I guess I have one quick question. I got 30 seconds. Mr. Yarmouth, I've always loved working with you. What's holding us back from a serious bipartisan discussion? Is it special interest, the PACs, or members afraid of a primary challenger? What is holding us back from talking about policy?
I think it's, as someone who, by the way, is one of your best customers.
Thank you.
Yeah. And founder and former co-chairman of the Bourbon Caucus. No, I think it's a combination of all those things, Mr. Trone. And, I think by and large, I think Mr. Womack has hit it on the head. The American people just are not savvy enough or knowledgeable enough about budget terminology, budget dimensions. It's easy to say, hey, we've got $33 trillion worth of debt when they have a family has a net worth of maybe $10,000, and not expect them to think that things are out of hand. We just don't know. And, I know they're economists, and I'm not an economist, who will say, yeah, this is out of hand, interest rates are going to go here. But if you look at the baby boomers, I'm one of them, we're going to disappear from the scene. How does that change the long-term outlook? I just don't think the American people don't have enough information, and I don't think we have enough information to actually accurately portray where we are. And if we can't do it, then the American people are not going to, they're going to be much more vulnerable to these rhetorical arguments and the exaggerations and so forth that is unfortunately what they get now. And
got to bring a lot more truth back to the matter and not a lot of such rhetoric and hyperbole.
And just let me say real quick.
Truth's what matters.
I totally agree with you about business people making decisions based on tax rates. I come from a family of business people. My father ran a Fortune 500 company. My brothers have been very successful. They've never made a decision based on the tax rate.
Thank you. I yield.